Were you ever alive when they were using those stores underground?
Well, they were there from the 1800s.
But tell them what was going on that you remember.
Well, they used to take beer from Froggy's pool hall underneath and then up into the bank for the bank board meetings. And my grandfather, Christopher Bach, was a board member, and he was a very prominent acting person in Ellinwood. Even though he was a farmer, they had on Monday afternoon, January the 20th, 1908, the bank deputy inspector, examiner from the state of Kansas, carefully arranged a pile of papers in front of him, meticulously laid his pencil across the stack, rose from his chair, and walked slowly to the front door of the Bank of Ellinwood, located in the front portion of the Wolf Hotel. Turning the key in the lock, he pulled down the curtain, which read, "Closed." Customers were puzzled. They rattled at the door, and no one came. It was not until the following day that word of the catastrophe which had befallen the town was made known. Facts and rumors were plentiful on Main Street Tuesday morning, but even rumors were more believable than what turned out to be the truth. On Tuesday afternoon, when cashier Leo Berkemont, a respected businessman and civic leader, was placed under arrest and taken to Great Bend to stand charges of falsifying statements concerning the condition of the bank. Most persons firmly believe that the examiner must have made a horrible mistake. Friends quickly made bail and secured his release. Little groups of businessmen gathered on the street or in privacy along Main Street on Wednesday morning. As more details became known, the shock and disbelief gradually gave way to misery before the day was gone. Nevertheless, the courage, practicality, and determination that this tragedy was not going to undermine the town surfaced. And so a group started having a civic meetings at the commercial club room, and the meeting was well attended, and the early gloom had not lightened when these men were not far removed from the pioneer hardships. These men had helped build the town, men who had wrestled the rough prairie, shared sorrow, and prospered. Their vision was that this town would survive. Before the meeting came to a close, it was definitely decided that a new bank, owned and controlled by local businessmen and farmers, would be started soon as possible, and over $10,000 in stock had been pledged. D.C. Johnson, assistant cashier of the Citizens Bank, which was across the street, prepared to tender his resignation to that concern and accept the position as cashier and manager of the new bank. By Friday night, Leo Berkemont had committed suicide. On Saturday, the deputy examiner Watts turned over the affairs of the defunct bank to the court-appointed receiver of Dawson in Great Bend. Dawson spent weeks sorting through the tangled and devious records and in preparing the evidence which resulted in the indictment and conviction of Ed Buckmore, president of the bank and brother of the dead cashier. In the end, there was nothing or little left for the depositors. By the end of January of 1908, many of the details involved in starting a new bank had been worked out, and the first meeting of the subscribers of stock was called. And they had 5 directors, and my great-grandfather was one of the directors that was elected to start this new bank.
Okay.
And they submitted their application to the state banking system and got approved. And the stockholders were informed that all subscriptions were due to be paid in full by March 3rd, and on March 4th, opening entries would be made in the books with the opening business set for March the 5th. All the bylaws had been drawn and adopted by the 57 shareholders, and the 57 shareholders had fully subscribed to the 250 shares of stock at $100 per share to provide an opening capital of $25,000. At the end of the first day, they had taken in $6,745 from the people of the community. The only record in the minutes of the books of the bank in those early days was a loss of $100, suffered not through a bad loan, but through an error in the collection of interest from the state treasurer in connection with some bonds. Past due notes continued to be at a minimum. By 1918, however, one note had been outstanding for a year for $1,500. They were uneasy about the situation, but it was eventually paid.
You sound very, like this story is very close to you. What made you so interested in this situation?
Because my great-grandfather was one that helped get this bank
The
going.
new bank started.
To get the bank started, to help. A community has to have a safe bank in order to make it a healthy environment where you can do trade, where you can sell things and buy things. And,
Okay. Was he involved with the other bank or just the new bank?
well, there was only one other bank, and it was a small bank, not many depository. But they needed something that they could control, that they had a board of directors that could supervise what was going on. And, in the years to come, we had the Great Depression yet to come. We had the Dust Bowl days. And the Great Depression of the 30s brought a dramatic change on all fronts in financing, not just in banking, but on everything. And banks throughout the United States were failing. And Ellinwood was largely an agriculture-oriented community, and the farmers were receiving 10 cents a bushel for wheat. By the time that they had gone to the elevator and sold their wheat, there wasn't enough money left to pay on an interest or on a note principal. So people were going under. Farms that had been very prosperous were now mortgaged, plastered with mortgages, and almost worthless. And the Citizen State Bank, which had operated on the other side of Main Street since the early 1880s, fell victim to the disastrous conditions and closed its doors. The People's State Bank survived, in part because of the public confidence built up by its management over the past 25 years. Because of this trust, the depositors did not come and ask for cash withdrawal. Also helping the bank to survive was the special stockholders fund that the bank established back in 1918. And that would have been at the time of World War I. And I have a booklet that was put together for the 50th anniversary of the People's State Bank. And a lot of this came out of there about things that happened in the bank. And I was interested in it because I held stock in the bank. The stock that my great-grandfather had was divided among his children. And so his daughter Anna, which was my grandmother, got stock. And my brother William and I got the stock that she had. And my brother, which had been a great-grandson of Christopher Bach, which helped start the bank, served as a director before it was sold to Sunshine Banks.
That's wonderful.
And I had sold my shares earlier in 1970s because I used the money to add to some money I had and bought as a down payment on 160 acres of farm ground in Missouri. So I kept the money invested, and I still have the farm.
Congratulations.
So, you know, what my great grandfather left us has continued down through the family and been held on to in different ways. The Ellinwood area of the People's State Bank recovered somewhat more rapidly than many communities from the throes of the Depression and the Dust Bowl days due to the early discovery of oil in the area. People's State Bank was among the first, if not the first, rural bank in Kansas to make an oil production loan. The first loan was to S.A. Murray for repairs to finish drilling a well in the sum of $100. Almost 40 years later, his borrowing days long past, he was still a staunch supporter and a depositor at People's State Bank in appreciation for getting that loan that enabled him to break into a wildcat that was a big oil field.